Wind, the Energy of Tomorrow by Jamie Howard. If you've ever been out on a cold day in February or March, you know this feeling. Rapid and intense gusts of wind, pushing some things around and, in some cases, causing permanent damage. Heck, sometimes you'll end up like this guy. Now, something this fundamental to nature is being utilized for energy production. But how does wind even happen? Wind, in its most basic form, is caused by the sun's uneven heating of the earth. The area of the earth closest to the sun, the equator, receives a disproportionate amount of the sun's warmth. This warm, low-pressure air then rises from the atmosphere and towards the poles, while high-pressure, cold air fills up the area near the equator. The movement of this air, usually from high to low-pressure areas, is what we know as wind. While wind turbines as we know them today are relatively recent, early forms and versions have been in use for a long time, including in Persia around 600 BCE. The first true wind turbine, however, was invented by the Scottish professor and engineer James Blythe in 1887. Wind energy became popular in the 1970s when an oil crisis happened in America as a result of the Middle East's embargo on oil, and the government quickly began to invest in alternative sources of energy to prevent America's dependence on them. Now the government subsidizes wind energy, and President Biden has put his support behind the creation of new wind farms. But how do these turbines even work? After all, you can't just magically turn wind into the energy we use to turn on lights and power up our devices. In rather ingenious fashion, wind turbines take advantage of this natural phenomenon. But before I explain how exactly they do that, there are four main parts to a wind turbine. The first part is the foundation. You could think of that like my feet or my legs, holding me up and making sure I'm stable and making sure I don't fall from wind. Same thing with a wind turbine, making sure a wind turbine doesn't fall from wind or any other forces that may be. The second part of a wind turbine is the tower. Now the tower, in my case, it could be like my legs and my torso, holding me up, making sure I can see things, reach things, etc. With a wind turbine, it's maybe making sure that they get the best angle to intercept the wind, because taller wind turbines receive more wind, which they need. The third part of a wind turbine is in the cell. That houses all the main components that both receive the rotational energy from the wind and convert it into electrical energy that you use in your homes and businesses. So that could be maybe my brain, processing information and doing an output, so talking or touching, doing actions, etc. The fourth part of the wind turbine, and this is kind of linked with a nacelle, but that's the blade assembly. So that's what receives the wind and that's what turns. So you could maybe think of that as my senses, so my eyes, my ears, what I feel, what I touch, what I hear, etc. So those are the four main parts. And then finally, when I'm stressed, maybe I need to take a break. Same thing with a wind turbine. So if the wind is too excessive, if the weather is bad, wind turbines will shut down to make sure that they don't fall over or get damaged. To give an idea of how all these parts work together to produce energy, allow me to explain what the process of conversion might look like. First, the wind turns the rotor or the blades to create rotational or kinematic energy. This energy is then transferred to the gearbox and the nacelle, which increases its rotational speed before it is sent to the generator. In the case of some wind turbines, there is no gearbox. Once it is sent to the generator, this is where the actual conversion of the rotational energy happens, as magnetic fields turn it into electrical energy. After the conversion occurs, the energy is sent through cables to a transformer, which changes the voltage of the energy to be congruent with the grid it is used for, and then it is sent to the substation, which then sends the energy to local grids, which then goes to homes and businesses. With the threat of global warming becoming more serious by the year, it is imperative that renewable energy sources are considered in relation to their impact on the environment. Fortunately, recent studies have shown the impact of wind energy on global temperature to be relatively mild. For instance, a recent study by an acclaimed Harvard professor found that even if wind energy was drastically scaled up such that it produced 100% of our energy, it would still only raise global temperatures by 1/10 of what our current energy portfolio would. Even beyond that, wind is fundamentally unalterable and is, in the truest sense, renewable. Wind energy has some upsides and downsides to consider. If wind energy expands as much as it's expected to, it will create close to 80,000 jobs in the next few decades. Furthermore, wind is more reliable as a consistent source of energy than sources such as solar, which depend on receiving sunlight. While these upsides may make wind energy seem like a no-brainer, it is important to consider what holds it back. Because the windiest areas and the areas with the most space for wind turbines are also usually the most remote, it is often harder to transfer the energy where it's needed. Additionally, building wind farms can disturb the natural environment, particularly for birds, many of whom have died flying into the blades of wind turbines. These problems are not necessarily unfixable, however, and engineers are making strides to alleviate these issues. On balance, wind energy is imperative in its contribution to a more renewable future, but at the same time it should be used in conjunction with other sources such as wind, solar, and hydroelectric in order to truly ensure that we can transition away from non-renewable energy sources successfully. Thank you.